As the night slowly settles in and everything becomes calm and quiet, it's the perfect moment to listen to a fairy tale, a story that has been softly told from one generation to the next. Tonight, we will journey together into a timeless tale of kindness, hardship, and the magic that can blossom even in the darkest corners. We'll find ourselves in a world where dreams take flight, and a little bit of magic can change everything. You might already know parts of it, but tonight we will be together to hear every gentle whisper and grand event. But before the story truly begins, you should get comfortable. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. So make yourself comfortable, let the outside world fade away, and let tonight's story begin. Settle in, relax, and allow the quiet magic of the tale to carry you through the night. Long, long ago, in a quaint sun-dappled kingdom, nestled beside a murmuring river and rolling green hills, there lived a kind and gentle girl named Ella. Her heart was as pure as the morning dew, and her spirit shone with an inner light that could brighten even the cloudiest day. Her hair was the color of spun moonlight, her eyes the serene blue of a summer sky, and her laughter, when she allowed herself to truly let it ring, sounded like the softest chime of silver bells. She lived in a beautiful house, with gardens that bloomed in a riot of color and fragrance, and rooms that echoed with the gentle hum of a happy home. Her mother, a woman of profound grace and wisdom, had filled Ella's earliest years with love, teaching her to cherish every living creature, to find beauty in the simplest things, and to always, always be kind. Even when the world seems harsh, my dearest, her mother would often whisper, stroking Ella's soft hair, "Let your kindness be your shield and your light." These words were etched deeply into Ella's soul, a comforting melody she carried with her always. But as is often the way with the most precious things, this idyllic happiness was not destined to last forever. A shadow, long and sorrowful, fell upon their home. Ella's beloved mother, after a long illness that slowly dimmed her vibrant spirit, finally closed her eyes and drifted into an eternal sleep. The world seemed to lose its color, its warmth, and its music. Ella, though young, felt the profound ache of loss, a hollow space in her chest where her mother's love had always resided. She found solace in the quiet corners of the garden, whispering her sorrows to the blooming roses and the gentle breeze, remembering her mother's gentle words and trying to hold on to the light she had left behind. Her father, a loving and honorable man, also grieved deeply, his once bright eyes now clouded with a persistent sadness. He loved Ella dearly and saw in her eyes the living reflection of his departed wife, which both comforted and pained him. Time, as it always does, continued its relentless march, and eventually Ella's father, believing it was for his daughter's sake, and perhaps also to mend his own broken heart, decided to marry again. He chose a woman, a widow of noble birth, who came with 2 daughters of her own. At first, Ella tried to be hopeful, to extend the kindness her mother had taught her to this new family. She imagined new sisters, playmates who would share her world, bringing back some of the joy that had been lost. But her hopes were quickly and cruelly dashed. The new stepmother, a woman of formidable appearance and even more formidable disposition, possessed a heart as cold and hard as stone. Her eyes, though sharp and intelligent, held no warmth, only a calculating glint. Her two daughters, Drusilla and Anastasia, were mirrors of their mother, but without her cunning intelligence, possessing only her vanity, greed, and a staggering lack of grace. They were boastful, ill-mannered, and consumed by envy, especially towards Ella's quiet beauty and gentle spirit. Soon after the wedding, Ella's father, too, fell ill. He lingered for a while, his kind eyes filled with a helpless sorrow, as he witnessed the slow, insidious change in his home, a change he was too weak to prevent. With his passing, Ella was left utterly alone, truly an orphan in her own home. The stepmother wasted no time in revealing her true, cruel nature. She harbored a deep, irrational jealousy of Ella, seeing her not as a stepdaughter to care for, but as a rival whose natural grace and kindness outshone her own daughter's forced efforts. Ella's beauty was a constant stinging reminder of what her own daughters lacked, and she was determined to crush that spirit, to extinguish that light. The beautiful house, once filled with love and laughter, transformed into a place of drudgery and silent suffering for Ella. Her stepmother stripped her of her fine clothes, giving her only threadbare rags to wear. Her soft bed was replaced with a straw pallet in the cold, dusty attic. Her days, once spent learning and playing, were now filled with an endless stream of chores. She was forced to become a servant in her own home, tending to her stepmother and stepsister's every whim, from sunrise until late into the night. They nicknamed her Cinderella because she often sat by the fireplace, covered in cinders and ash from the endless cleaning, and the name meant to be an insult. Stuck. But even amidst the ashes, Ella's inner light continued to glimmer, a resilient ember refusing to be extinguished. She clung to her mother's words, finding small moments of quiet kindness to offer to the creatures of the house, and nurturing the hope that one day her fortunes might change, even if just a little. Life for Cinderella, as she was now widely known, settled into a monotonous rhythm of endless toil and quiet endurance. Her days were a blur of scrubbing floors, polishing silver, mending torn garments, and fetching and carrying for her demanding stepfamily. The grand house, once her childhood's sanctuary, now felt like a gilded cage. Yet, despite the relentless physical labor and the emotional weight of her stepmother's and stepsister's cruelty, Cinderella's spirit remained remarkably unbroken. She found small pockets of joy and comfort where she could. In the warmth of the kitchen hearth, where she often sought refuge. In the soft purr of a stray cat that sometimes crept into the scullery, or in the fluttering wings of the sparrows that would perch on her attic window, seeming to offer silent companionship. She conversed with them, sharing her quiet sorrows and her secret hopes, and they, in turn, offered a sense of connection to a world beyond her four walls. Her kindness, a seed planted by her mother, continued to blossom even in the barren soil of her present circumstances. One crisp autumn morning, as the leaves outside turned brilliant shades of gold and crimson, a momentous announcement echoed through the kingdom, carried by the ringing of town criers' bells and the hurried whispers of townsfolk. The king, it was proclaimed, was hosting a magnificent royal ball. Not just any ball, but an event of unprecedented splendor, to be held at the grandest palace in the land. The purpose of this extravagant fete was clear. The prince, heir to the throne, had reached a suitable age for marriage, and the king wished him to choose a bride. Every eligible maiden in the kingdom was invited to attend, in the hope that one might capture the young prince's heart. When the official royal decree, embossed with the royal crest, arrived at Cinderella's house, it caused an immediate upheaval. Her stepmother, with a self-satisfied smirk, read the invitation aloud, her voice dripping with an anticipation that bordered on frenzy. Drusilla and Anastasia shrieked with delight, imagining themselves adorned in the finest silks and jewels, dazzling the prince with their perceived charms. The entire household was plunged into a chaotic flurry of preparations. But for the stepmother and stepsisters, these preparations were solely focused on themselves. For weeks leading up to the ball, the house became a whirlwind of fabric, ribbons, and exasperated cries. Tailors were summoned to measure and sew elaborate gowns. Dressmakers arrived with bolts of shimmering silk and velvet. And jewelers displayed their most sparkling gems. Cinderella, naturally, was at the heart of it all, not as a participant, but as an unpaid, overworked assistant. She stitched seams until her fingers ached, pressed velvets until her arms grew weary, and ran countless errands, fetching laces, pinning hems, and polishing shoes. She endured Drusilla's constant complaints about a dress being too tight, or Anastasia's incessant whining about a color that didn't quite flatter her sallow complexion. Every complaint, every demand was met with Cinderella's quiet efficiency, though her heart felt a pang of longing with each swish of expensive fabric she handled. She watched them, her stepsisters, as they preened before mirrors, experimenting with elaborate hairstyles and admiring their reflections, their faces alight with greedy ambition. Their conversations revolved entirely around what they would wear, how they would dance, and, most importantly, how they would ensnare the prince. "Surely, sister, my emerald gown will highlight my captivating eyes," Drusilla would preen, twirling before the mirror. "Nonsense, Drusilla. The prince will be captivated by my magnificent curls, which this ruby necklace will perfectly complement," Anastasia would retort, puffing out her chest. All the while, Cinderella would be kneeling on the floor, mending a tear in one of their old gowns, a wistful sigh escaping her lips. It was impossible for Cinderella not to feel a flicker of hope, a tiny, fragile spark that perhaps, just perhaps, she too might be able to attend. The invitation had explicitly stated every eligible maiden. Could that include her? The thought, though fleeting, brought a momentary lightness to her weary heart. She imagined for a brief instant what it might be like to step into the grand ballroom, to feel the swirl of music, to dance just once. She dared not voice this hope, knowing it would be met with scorn and ridicule. Finally, one evening, after a particularly exhausting day of fitting and adjusting, Cinderella gathered the courage to timidly approach her stepmother. Her voice was barely a whisper, her hands clasped nervously before her. "Stepmother," she began, "the invitation, it said that all eligible maidens are invited. May I also attend the ball?" The stepmother's response was a chillingly slow, deliberate smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. Drusilla and Anastasia burst into peals of mocking laughter, pointing their fingers at Cinderella's ash-smudged face and ragged dress. "You go to the royal ball?" Drusilla shrieked, clutching her stomach in feigned amusement. "In those dreadful rags?" Anastasia added, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. The stepmother waited for their laughter to subside before speaking, her voice as sharp and cutting as a freshly honed blade. "My dear Cinderella, you wish to attend the royal ball. How preposterous! Look at you. You have no suitable gown, no slippers, no carriage, no escort. And who would dance with a girl covered in cinders, smelling of the kitchen?" She paused, letting her cruel words sink in. "Besides," she continued, a malicious glint in her eye, "you have far too much work to do here. Who would prepare us for the ball? Who would see to our needs while we are gone?" She then added, almost as an afterthought, "However, if you can finish all your chores and somehow find a suitable dress, then perhaps we shall see." Her tone, though feigning a sliver of possibility, made it clear that she considered it an utter impossibility. The offer was a cruel jest, designed to offer a glimmer of hope only to brutally extinguish it. Cinderella's heart sank, heavier than any bucket of water she had ever carried. The fragile spark of hope she had nurtured was ruthlessly stomped out, leaving behind only the bitter taste of despair and the familiar chill of neglect. The cruel words of her stepmother echoed in Cinderella's ears, each syllable a tiny stone dropped into the already deep well of her despair. The conditional "if" was a barbed hook designed to catch her fragile hope, only to rip it away. If you can finish all your chores and somehow find a suitable dress, the impossibility of it all pressed down on her, a suffocating weight. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that even if by some miracle she managed to complete the Herculean list of tasks, and even if she conjured a dress from thin air, her stepmother would find another reason, another excuse to deny her. The laughter of Drusilla and Anastasia still rang in her mind, a mocking symphony that underscored her utter helplessness. With a heavy sigh that felt like it carried all the sorrow in the world, Cinderella retreated to her solitary attic room, the only place in the vast house where she felt she could truly be herself, even if that self was now utterly heartbroken. As the last sliver of twilight faded from her small window, painting the distant hills in shades of bruised purple and inky blue, Cinderella sat on her straw pallet, the familiar chill of the attic doing little to cool the burning ache in her chest. A single tear traced a path down her ash-smudged cheek, followed by another, until silent sobs racked her slender frame. Her dreams of dancing, of experiencing just one moment of magic, felt irrevocably shattered. The injustice of it all, the sheer unfeeling cruelty, was a bitter draught she was forced to swallow. But Cinderella was not entirely alone in her sorrow. From the dark corners and dusty nooks of the attic, tiny, sympathetic eyes watched her. Her faithful companions, the mice and birds she had befriended over the long, lonely years, had sensed her distress. Yak, a plump, energetic mouse with an endearing stutter, and Gus, a lovable, somewhat clumsy newcomer, scampered closer, their tiny whiskers twitching with concern. The sparrows, with their bright, knowing eyes, fluttered from the eaves to perch on the windowsill, tilting their heads as if listening intently to her unspoken pain. They had witnessed her quiet acts of kindness, her gentle whispers, her shared crumbs, and now they felt a fierce loyalty and a desire to help their beloved friend. A flurry of tiny whispers and chirps filled the air, a secret council of the innocent. Yak, ever the leader, began to devise a plan. Gus, with a nod of earnest agreement, readily accepted his role. The sparrows, quick and agile, understood their part. They had overheard the stepmother's cruel condition, the suitable dress, and they knew that if Cinderella had any chance, it would be with a gown. And so, with a shared unspoken vow, they set to work, driven by their love for Cinderella and their indignation at her stepfamily's unkindness. Throughout the night, while the rest of the house slept, oblivious, a bustling, silent army worked tirelessly in the attic. The mice, with incredible dexterity, scavenged discarded scraps of fabric from the stepmother's and stepsister's sewing baskets, a strip of emerald silk, a swatch of shimmering lavender velvet, a cascade of ivory lace that had fallen unnoticed. They unpicked forgotten stitches, carefully unwound spools of thread, and even gathered tiny, glistening beads that had rolled under furniture. Jack, ever the strategist, organized the fabric, while Gus, with surprisingly nimble paws, held pins and occasionally tugged at stubborn threads. The sparrows, their tiny beaks like precision tools, flew in and out of the open window, returning with lost ribbons from the garden, glistening dew-kissed petals, and delicate strands of forgotten embroidery floss. They perched on the edge of the fabric, meticulously weaving and stitching, their small fingers and beaks working with a speed and dedication that belied their size. Their collective efforts were a testament to the power of shared purpose and selfless love. They worked with such quiet determination that the only sounds were the soft rustle of fabric, the snip of a thread, and the gentle patter of tiny feet. As dawn began to paint the sky with soft hues of rose and gold, Cinderella finally stirred from her troubled sleep. She rubbed her eyes, still heavy with unshed tears, and sat up, preparing for another day of drudgery. But as her gaze fell upon the corner of the attic, her breath caught in her throat. There, shimmering softly in the faint morning light, lay a dress. It wasn't magnificent or grand, made of the finest silks that adorned her stepsisters. But it was beautiful in its own unique way, crafted with love and care from an assortment of discarded scraps. The bodice was a gentle lavender, edged with a delicate ivory lace that had once been part of her late mother's wedding veil, a piece the mice had lovingly found. The skirt, a soft emerald green, was adorned with tiny shimmering beads and embroidered with delicate floral patterns made from collected threads and petals. Ribbons of various soft hues were artfully woven into the fabric, lending it a whimsical, ethereal charm. It was a patchwork dream, a garment born of devotion and ingenuity, reflecting the very essence of kindness that Cinderella embodied. A gasp escaped her lips, a sound of pure wonder and disbelief. "My dress," she whispered, tears, this time of joy, springing to her eyes. She carefully picked up the gown, the fabric soft against her fingertips, each stitch a testament to the selfless efforts of her tiny friends. Her heart swelled with an emotion so profound it almost hurt. The despair of the previous night melted away, replaced by a radiant hope, a belief that perhaps, just perhaps, the impossible might not be so impossible after all. She held the dress close, feeling the warmth of the love woven into its very threads. She thanked her animal friends, her voice thick with emotion, and they chirped and squeaked in delight, proud of their secret accomplishment. The day of the ball arrived, a whirlwind of nervous energy and excitement in the stepmother's house. Drizella and Anastasia were in a frenzy, preening and primping, their voices shrill with anticipation, as Cinderella helped them into their elaborate gowns. The air was thick with the scent of lavender and rosewater, hairspray and expensive perfumes. Cinderella, her heart thumping with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, waited for them to be ready, the patchwork dress hidden carefully in a basket. Finally, the carriage that would take them to the ball arrived, its ornate wheels crunching on the gravel drive. "Are you quite ready, girls?" the stepmother called out, her voice sharp with impatience. This was Cinderella's moment. Taking a deep breath, she emerged from her hiding place, the precious dress in her arms. "I am ready too, stepmother," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "And look, my friends helped me make a dress." Drizella and Anastasia, catching sight of the dress, stopped dead in their tracks, their faces contorting in a mixture of disbelief and venomous jealousy. The dress, though simple, was far more charming and unique than their own stiff gaudy gowns, and the sight of Cinderella, radiant and hopeful, was a stinging affront to their vanity. "Why the nerve?" Drizella shrieked, her voice rising in pitch. "That's my sash," Anastasia screamed, pointing a finger. "And my beads. She's stolen our trimmings." The stepmother's face hardened, her eyes narrowing to cruel slits. She saw not the beauty of the dress, but the threat of Cinderella's inherent charm overshadowing her own daughters. Before Cinderella could even utter a word in defense, Drizella lunged forward, tearing a strip of the emerald fabric. Anastasia, not to be outdone, snatched at the delicate lace, ripping it from the bodice. "You'll ruin everything!" the stepmother hissed, encouraging her daughter's rampage. The sisters descended upon Cinderella, their fingers flying, ripping and tearing at the lovingly crafted gown. Ribbons were yanked, beads scattered across the floor like tears, and fabric was shredded into irreparable scraps. Cinderella stood frozen, her eyes wide with horror, watching helplessly as her beautiful dress, and with it, her last shred of hope, was systematically destroyed. Her tiny animal friends, hidden in the shadows, watched in silent agony, their efforts ruined in a matter of seconds. When they were finished, the dress was nothing but a pile of rags at Cinderella's feet. "There," the stepmother sneered, "now you have nothing suitable to wear, and you still have chores to do. We shall be late." And with that, she swept out of the room, her daughters following, their cruel laughter echoing behind them, leaving Cinderella utterly alone. Amidst the tattered remains of her dream, her heart shattered, she sank to her knees, burying her face in her hands, her sobs racking her entire body. The tears fell like a silent rain, washing away the last vestiges of hope, leaving her with an emptiness more profound than she had ever known. The heavy door clanged shut, its sound echoing through the now empty hall, a final, brutal punctuation mark to the cruel destruction of Cinderella's hopes. Alone amidst the tattered remnants of her dream dress, Cinderella knelt on the cold floor, her body shaking with profound, silent sobs. The tears streamed down her face, washing away the cinders and smudges, revealing the raw pain etched there. It wasn't just the dress, it was the utter annihilation of her tiny, defiant spark of hope, the crushing realization that her stepfamily would never, ever allow her a moment of happiness or a glimpse of a different life. The laughter of Drizella and Anastasia, the cold, triumphant sneer of her stepmother, replayed in her mind, turning her sorrow into a bitter, aching void. Her loyal animal friends, hidden in the shadows, whimpered softly, their tiny hearts aching with her pain, utterly helpless to mend what had been so cruelly broken. It felt as though all the light had gone out of the world, leaving her in an impenetrable darkness. Just as the last vestiges of hope threatened to completely extinguish themselves, a soft, ethereal glow began to emanate from the corner of the room. It wasn't a harsh, bright light, but a gentle, shimmering warmth, like moonlight filtered through silk. A delicate, sweet scent of jasmine and stardust filled the air, replacing the lingering smell of tears and old ashes. Cinderella, her eyes still blurred with tears, slowly lifted her head, her gaze drawn to the radiant shimmer. And then she saw her, standing there, bathed in the soft golden light, was a woman unlike any she had ever seen. She was small, but her presence was enormous, radiating an aura of benevolent power and ancient wisdom. Her face was kind, lined with gentle wrinkles that crinkled at the corners of her eyes as she smiled, a smile that promised comfort and understanding. She wore a shimmering gown of iridescent silver that seemed woven from moonlight itself, and in her hand she held a slender, elegant wand tipped with a tiny twinkling star. It was her fairy godmother. "Why, my dear child?" The fairy godmother's voice was as soft and melodious as the chiming of a crystal bell, yet it held an undercurrent of firm resolve. "What is all this weeping for? You should be making ready for the ball." Cinderella, still stunned, could only stammer, "Oh, but I cannot go. They have gone, and my dress is ruined, and I have nothing." She gestured helplessly at the pitiful pile of rags on the floor. The fairy godmother chuckled, a sound like rustling leaves in a gentle breeze. "Nothing, you say? Nonsense, child. Where there is kindness and a good heart, there is always hope, and where there is hope, there is magic. Now dry those tears, for you shall go to the ball." With a reassuring nod, the fairy godmother gently placed a hand on Cinderella's shoulder. "First, we need a carriage. Go into the garden and fetch me a pumpkin, a large round one, mind you." Still bewildered, but feeling a tiny spark of hope rekindling within her, Cinderella wiped her eyes and hurried into the moonlit garden. She found the largest, most perfectly rounded pumpkin she could and carefully brought it back. The fairy godmother examined it with a knowing smile. "Excellent," she exclaimed. With a flourish of her wand and a soft, whispered incantation, the tiny star on its tip glowed brilliantly. In a flash of shimmering light, the ordinary pumpkin began to swell and change, its rough skin smoothing into gleaming curves, its stem twisting into an elegant handle. In mere seconds, where a simple pumpkin once lay, there now stood a magnificent, gilded carriage, sparkling as if made of spun starlight, its wheels glinting, ready to carry her to the ball. "Now for the horses," the fairy godmother declared, her eyes twinkling mischievously. "Go, my dear, find me 6 mice." Cinderella, a delighted gasp escaping her lips, quickly called for her tiny friends. Jack, Gus, and 4 other brave little mice, still trembling slightly from the earlier events but eager to help, cautiously scurried forth. With another wave of her wand, the fairy godmother transformed them, one by one, into 6 magnificent dappled gray horses, their coats shining, their manes flowing, perfectly harnessed and ready to pull the carriage. Gus, the last to be transformed, let out a tiny squeak of surprise before he was a proud, strong stallion. "A coachman, we shall meet a coachman," the fairy godmother pondered. Cinderella remembered the old horse who lived in the stable, too old and infirm for heavy work now. She quickly brought him. With a third wave and another whispered spell, the old horse was transformed into a stately coachman, dressed in a smart livery, ready to guide the magnificent team. And finally, for the footmen who would open the carriage door and announce her arrival. The fairy godmother spotted Cinderella's sleepy dog, Bruno, and a lizard scurrying across the floor. With 2 more taps of her wand, the dog became a splendid footman, attentive and distinguished, and the lizard transformed into another equally dashing footman, both ready to serve. Cinderella watched in wide-eyed wonder, her heart soaring with disbelief and delight. The magic was real. It was truly happening. But then she looked down at her own ragged, ash-stained dress and her bare feet. But, godmother," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I still have nothing to wear to such a grand ball." The fairy godmother simply smiled, a radiant, all-encompassing smile. "Ah, yes, the most important part. My dear, a kind heart deserves the most beautiful gown." With a gentle twirl of her wand, she touched Cinderella's tattered clothes. In a spectacular burst of shimmering light, the old rags vanished, replaced by a gown of breathtaking beauty. It was a vision of midnight blue, the color of the deepest twilight sky, shimmering with tiny iridescent crystals that sparkled like 1,000 distant stars. The fabric flowed and swirled around her, light as air, delicate yet regal. Her hair, once simply tied back, was now adorned with a delicate tiara that caught the light, and on her feet, adorning them perfectly with a most exquisite pair of glass slippers, clear and sparkling, reflecting the magic that had brought them into being. Cinderella gasped, hardly recognizing herself in the shimmering vision reflected in the polished floor. She twirled, feeling the exquisite fabric billow around her, the delicate glass slippers a perfect fit. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined such splendor. She felt like a true princess, not just outside, but within, her spirit uplifted and radiant. "Now listen carefully, my dear," the fairy godmother said, her voice becoming serious, her eyes holding a stern warning. "This magic is powerful, but it is not everlasting. There is one very important condition you must remember. You must be home before the clock strikes midnight. At the stroke of 12, the spell will break. Your carriage will turn back into a pumpkin, your horses into mice, your coachman and footmen will revert to their original forms, and your beautiful gown, it will become rags once more. Do you understand?" Cinderella nodded, her heart thumping with excitement and a touch of apprehension. "Yes, godmother, I understand. Before midnight." "Good," the fairy godmother smiled, her warmth returning. "Now, go to the ball and have the most wonderful time. But remember, let your kindness shine, for that is the true magic within you." With a final encouraging gesture, the fairy godmother vanished as softly and magically as she had appeared, leaving behind only the faint scent of jasmine and the lingering sparkle of stardust. Cinderella, her heart bursting with joy and wonder, stepped out of her humble home and into the waiting magnificent carriage. The coachman bowed, the footman opened the door with a flourish, and with a gentle jingle of harnesses, the carriage rolled silently away, carrying her towards the distant, brightly lit palace, towards an adventure she could only have dreamt of. The night air was cool and invigorating against her skin, and the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what magic this extraordinary night would bring. The magnificent carriage, gleaming with its magical light, glided silently through the moonlit streets, carrying Cinderella towards the grand palace. Her heart beat a joyful rhythm against her ribs, a mixture of exhilaration and a touch of nervous anticipation. The crisp night air, carrying the faint scent of blossoming jasmine from distant gardens, kissed her cheeks. She peered out the window, mesmerized by the passing scenery, the softly lit cottages, the ancient, gnarled trees, and finally, the towering, majestic walls of the royal palace, bathed in 1,000 twinkling lights. The music of the ball, a lilting, enchanting melody, drifted out on the breeze, growing louder with every turn of the carriage wheel, pulling her towards a world she had only dared to imagine. As the carriage finally drew up to the palace gates, the imposing guards, accustomed to seeing only the kingdom's finest, stood utterly speechless at the sight of such an extraordinary equipage. The footmen, now splendid and regal in their livery, expertly opened the carriage door, and Cinderella, her hand trembling slightly, stepped out. The glass slippers felt cool and smooth on her feet, and the gown shimmered around her, making her feel as though she was floating on air. She took a deep breath, recalling her fairy godmother's words about letting her kindness shine, and with a newfound confidence, walked towards the grand entrance. Inside, the ballroom was a dazzling spectacle of opulence and gaiety. Chandeliers, heavy with countless sparkling crystals, cast a warm golden glow over the scene. Hundreds of elegantly dressed ladies and gentlemen whirled and swayed to the enchanting music of a full orchestra. The air was alive with the murmur of conversations, the rustle of silk gowns, and the delicate clinking of glasses. Cinderella, her eyes wide with wonder, felt a wave of awe wash over her. It was even more magnificent than she had ever imagined. As she entered, a hush fell over the room. Conversation ceased, and all eyes drawn by her ethereal beauty and radiant presence turned towards her. It was as if a luminous star had suddenly appeared in their midst. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Who is she? I've never seen such grace." An unknown princess, perhaps? Even her stepmother and stepsisters, who were busily gossiping in a corner, stopped short, their mouths agape, failing to recognize the dazzling stranger who effortlessly outshone every other lady in the room. They felt a familiar pang of resentment, wondering who this vision of beauty was, utterly unaware that it was the very girl they had left weeping amongst the cinders. But it was the prince, a handsome and charming young man, who was most captivated. He had been dutifully dancing with several eligible maidens, his smile polite, but his eyes holding a hint of boredom, for none had truly captured his interest. But the moment his gaze fell upon Cinderella, a spark ignited within him. He felt an undeniable pull, a sense of wonder and curiosity that was utterly new. He stopped his current dance partner mid-twirl, a silent apology in his eyes, and began to make his way through the throng, his eyes never leaving Cinderella. Cinderella, feeling his gaze, felt a blush creep up her cheeks. But she met his eyes with a gentle, open sincerity. When he finally reached her, he bowed deeply, a genuine smile lighting his face. "May I have the honor of this dance, fair maiden?" he asked, his voice soft and respectful. Cinderella curtsied gracefully, her heart fluttering. "It would be my pleasure, Your Highness," she replied, her voice a soft murmur. As the prince took her hand, a tremor ran through her. The music began again, a romantic waltz, and they glided onto the dance floor. It was as if they were the only two people in the vast ballroom. The prince was a skillful dancer, and Cinderella, light as a feather in her magical gown and glass slippers, followed his lead effortlessly. They moved together in perfect harmony, a vision of grace and elegance. He asked her questions about herself, and she, cautious not to reveal her true identity, spoke of her love for nature, for quiet moments and for kindness, her words reflecting the pure heart that shone through her humble circumstances. The prince found himself utterly enchanted, not just by her beauty, but by her genuine warmth, her gentle wit, and the serene depth in her eyes. He had never met anyone quite like her. They danced on and on, lost in each other's presence. Other guests watched, mesmerized, as the prince paid no attention to anyone else, his focus entirely on the mysterious beauty. He introduced her to his father, the king, who, seeing his son's radiant happiness, smiled with approval. The king and queen were equally charmed by her quiet dignity and grace, noticing that she was unlike the other, more forward and ambitious young women. Drizella and Anastasia, seething with envy and confusion, tried to approach the prince, but he politely yet firmly waved them away, his attention wholly absorbed by Cinderella. "Who is that girl?" Drizella muttered, gnawing on her lip. "And why is the prince completely ignoring us for her?" Anastasia grumbled, her face a mask of sour jealousy. Their stepmother, ever shrewd, began to observe the unknown girl more closely. A flicker of suspicion, a tiny, unsettling familiarity stirring at the back of her mind, though she quickly dismissed it as impossible. The hours flew by like swift birds. Cinderella was utterly swept up in the magic of the evening, the joy of dancing with the prince, and the intoxicating feeling of being treated with respect and admiration. She had never felt so cherished, so seen. Every moment was a precious gem, glittering with newfound happiness. She felt truly alive, truly herself, free from the shadow of her stepfamily's cruelty. She laughed, a genuine, joyful sound that brought a smile to the prince's face, and for a fleeting moment, she almost forgot her fairy godmother's urgent warning. As the music swelled to a crescendo, and the prince whispered a compliment into her ear, promising to find her again, a distant bell began to chime. Dong! Cinderella's eyes widened in sudden, stark realization. Dong! The first chime of midnight. Her heart leaped into her throat, a cold wave of panic washing over her, instantly shattering the beautiful illusion. Dong! She remembered her fairy godmother's words, the strict warning, the terrible consequence. Dong! "I must go," she exclaimed, pulling away from the bewildered prince, her voice laced with urgency. "Dong! But why, fair maiden? Your name? Where do you live? I must see you again," the prince pleaded, trying to hold her hand. "Dong! I cannot," Cinderella cried, truly terrified now. "I must leave. Dong." She tore herself away from his grasp, the urgency of the ticking clock paramount. Dong. With a swift, desperate movement, she gathered her shimmering gown and fled, tearing across the ballroom floor, past the startled guests, past her stepfamily, who could only gape at her sudden, unceremonious departure. Dong! The prince, utterly confused and heartbroken, rushed after her. Dong! She darted down the grand marble staircase, her heart pounding like a drum. The glass slippers, light but precarious, on the smooth steps. Dong! As she reached the bottom, her foot caught, and one of her delicate glass slippers slipped off, tumbling down the steps with a soft, melodic clink. She hesitated for a split second, glancing back at the single sparkling slipper lying on the cold marble, but the chimes of the clock were now frantic, merciless. Dong, dong, dong. Midnight, she whispered in horror. There was no time. She couldn't risk the magic fading while she was still within the palace walls. She left the slipper behind, a solitary testament to her hurried flight, and burst out of the palace doors, running as fast as her legs could carry her towards the waiting carriage. Dong! 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 The final deafening chimes of the clock reverberated through the night, echoing Cinderella's frantic footsteps as she burst out of the palace doors. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. She could feel the magic beginning to fray, a subtle tingling sensation spreading through her body. The magnificent carriage was waiting, the coachman holding open the door with a look of desperate urgency. Without a backward glance, she scrambled inside, collapsing onto the velvet seat just as the 12th chime faded into the silent night. And then, as if struck by an invisible force, the world around her shimmered and dissolved. The splendid carriage instantly shrank and warped, its gilded curves collapsing back into the humble, rough-skinned pumpkin it once was. The 6 magnificent horses, with a collective neigh of surprise, reverted into tiny, frightened mice, scattering in every direction as their harnesses vanished. The elegant coachman, with a soft poof, transformed back into the old, weary stable horse, whinnying softly as his smart livery evaporated. The dashing footman, Bruno and the lizard, reappeared, looking utterly bewildered and slightly dazed, and Cinderella's breathtaking gown of starlight and midnight blue, with a final ethereal shimmer, disintegrated, leaving her once again in her familiar, ash-stained rags. The exquisite glass slippers, however, somehow remained on her feet, the magic perhaps unable to fully undo their crystalline permanence, a beautiful anomaly. She stumbled out of the pumpkin, disoriented but immensely relieved to be out of sight of the palace, and raced towards the familiar, if unwelcoming, path to her home. Her heart still ached with the abrupt end of her dream, but she was safe, and the secret of the magic was still her own. She arrived back at her cold attic room, breathless and trembling, just as the first faint hints of dawn began to paint the eastern sky. She quickly shed the precious glass slippers, hiding them carefully beneath the loose floorboard, a secret treasure, a tangible reminder of the magical night. Then she collapsed onto her straw pallet, exhausted, the vivid memories of the ball mingling with the reality of her humble surroundings. Meanwhile, back at the palace, the prince stood on the grand staircase, utterly bewildered and heartbroken. The mysterious maiden had vanished as swiftly and silently as she had appeared, leaving behind only the echo of her laughter and the lingering scent of jasmine. He gazed at the single glass slipper left on the marble step, its delicate beauty capturing the last remaining trace of the magic of the evening. It was so tiny, so exquisite, he knew it could only belong to her. He cradled it carefully in his hands, his heart filled with a fierce determination. He had found his true love, and he would not let her disappear forever. The next morning, the entire kingdom was abuzz with the news of the prince's mysterious dancing partner. No one knew who she was, where she came from, or why she had fled so abruptly. The prince, however, was resolute. He declared that he would search every corner of the kingdom, if necessary, until he found the maiden whose foot fit the glass slipper. He proclaimed that she, and she alone, would be his bride. And so, royal messengers were dispatched, carrying the delicate glass slipper wrapped in velvet. They went from house to house, from village to village, knocking on every door, presenting the slipper to every eligible maiden. There was a frenzy of excitement and hope across the land. Girls eagerly tried on the slipper, their hearts thumping with dreams of becoming a princess. But the slipper, though beautiful, seemed almost enchanted itself, refusing to fit anyone. It was either too small, too large, or simply slid off, never quite finding its match. Muse of the prince's quest and the tiny magical slipper eventually reached Cinderella's household. The stepmother and stepsisters were immediately plunged into another frantic flurry of activity, convinced that one of them must be the mysterious beauty. Drusilla and Anastasia spent hours trying to squeeze their large feet into the impossibly small slipper, groaning and grunting with effort, stuffing their toes into it, even trying to chop off parts of their heels with a kitchen knife, all under their mother's watchful, encouraging eye. But it was no use. The slipper stubbornly refused to accommodate them, mocking their efforts with its delicate, unyielding form. Cinderella, meanwhile, was kept busier than ever. Her stepmother, knowing that the royal messengers were approaching, made sure Cinderella was occupied with a never-ending list of chores, sweeping, scrubbing, and polishing to keep her out of sight. The stepmother was paranoid that Cinderella's presence, even in her rags, might somehow interfere with her daughter's chances, or a deeper, more unsettling thought that someone might actually notice Cinderella, even in her abject state. Finally, the royal messenger, a dignified duke, arrived at Cinderella's house. He entered, holding the glass slipper with the reverence of a sacred relic. Drusilla and Anastasia immediately pushed forward, eager to be the first to try. They sat on chairs, their mother hovering nervously as the Duke presented the slipper. Drusilla, with a grunt, attempted to force her foot into it, but it was far too small. "Impossible!" she cried. "My feet must have swollen from all the excitement." Anastasia then tried, equally unsuccessfully, her foot refusing to even go past the tip of the slipper. "Oh, the silly thing must be too tight," she complained, wiggling her toes. Their mother, growing increasingly desperate, urged them to try harder, pushing and pulling, but to no avail. The slipper would simply not fit. As the Duke prepared to leave, defeated, Cinderella, who had been observing from a distance, hidden behind a stack of firewood, felt a sudden surge of courage. Her heart whispered her mother's words, "Let your kindness be your shield and your light." She knew, with a certainty deep in her soul, that the slipper was hers. "May I try, sir?" she asked timidly, stepping forward from the shadows. The stepmother gasped, her face contorting in a mask of fury. "You! How dare you! Get back to your chores, you impertinent girl. This is no place for a scullery maid." Drusilla and Anastasia burst into derisive laughter, pointing at Cinderella's ragged dress and ash-smeared face. "Her? She can't possibly be the one," Drusilla sneered. "She smells of the kitchen," Anastasia added. But the Duke, a kind man with a keen eye, had noticed the sparkle in Cinderella's eyes and the quiet dignity in her posture, despite her humble attire. He had also grown weary of the aggressive and ill-mannered attempts of the other maidens. "The prince's decree states that every eligible maiden must try the slipper," he said firmly, silencing the stepmother with a gaze of quiet authority. "Let her try." Cinderella, her heart pounding, cautiously approached. She sat down, her hands trembling slightly, and extended her foot. The Duke carefully took the delicate glass slipper and gently placed it upon her foot. As if it had been molded just for her, the slipper slid onto her foot with effortless grace, fitting perfectly, snugly, as if it had found its true home. It sparkled on her foot, a perfect, dazzling match. The glass slipper, shimmering with an ethereal glow, settled perfectly onto Cinderella's foot, as if it had been custom-made for her and her alone. A gasp, collective and profound, rippled through the small, crowded room. The Duke, a man of worldly experience, looked utterly astonished, his initial wariness replaced by a look of profound wonder. The stepmother's face, usually so composed in its cruelty, drained of all color, her jaw slack with disbelief and a dawning terrible realization. Drusilla and Anastasia shrieked, not with laughter this time, but with sheer, unadulterated fury and outrage, their eyes bulging with venomous jealousy. "It can't be," Drusilla shrieked, stamping her foot. "It's a trick," Anastasia wailed, pointing a trembling finger at Cinderella. But the slipper, silent and undeniable, told its own story. It fit with such exquisite perfection that there was no room for doubt, no argument against its truth. Cinderella, looking down at her foot, felt a surge of triumph, a sweet, overwhelming joy, after so many years of sorrow. This was it. This was the moment. She looked up at the Duke, a radiant smile gracing her lips, transforming her ash-smeared face into a vision of pure, unadorned beauty. Just then, as if on cue, Cinderella reached into the hidden compartment under the loose floorboard, a secret known only to her and her animal friends. Withdrawing the other glass slipper, she presented it to the Duke. "And here, sir," she said, her voice clear and steady, filled with a newfound confidence, "is its mate." The Duke, his eyes wide, took the second slipper and, with gentle reverence, placed it on her other foot. It, too, slid on flawlessly, completing the magical pair. Cinderella stood, the glass slippers catching the morning light, sparkling like captured starlight, making her appear truly ethereal. At that very instant, as if in response to the profound truth revealed, a soft, golden light began to emanate from Cinderella. It was the benevolent glow of her fairy godmother, manifesting for a final, glorious moment. The magical aura swirled around Cinderella, and in a breathtaking transformation, her tattered rags dissolved, replaced by a gown of even greater splendor than the one she had worn to the ball. This dress was not merely shimmering fabric, it was a cascade of pure white silk, embroidered with delicate silver threads that formed intricate patterns of stars and constellations. Her hair, no longer simply tied, was now elegantly swept up and adorned with a shimmering tiara that gleamed with soft light. She stood before them, not as the downtrodden scullery maid, but as a vision of regal grace and unparalleled beauty, her inner light shining outward for all to see. The stepmother and stepsisters could only recoil, their faces pale with shock and bitter mortification. Their schemes, their cruelty, their relentless efforts to diminish and destroy her had all come to naught. Here stood the very girl they had abused and ridiculed, transformed into a dazzling princess right before their eyes. The Duke, overcome with emotion and awe, bowed deeply before her, acknowledging her true identity and the profound magic that surrounded her. "Princess," he murmured, his voice filled with reverence, "the prince awaits you. You are indeed the one." With a nod to her now utterly speechless and defeated stepfamily, who could only watch in stunned silence as their world crumbled around them, Cinderella followed the Duke out of the house. The grand royal carriage, which had been waiting discreetly, now pulled forward. Its ornate doors were opened by liveried footmen, and Cinderella, her head held high, stepped inside. The ride to the palace was a dream, a stark contrast to her previous flight from it. The sun was now high in the sky, its warmth a comforting embrace after the coldness of her past life. When she arrived at the palace, the prince was waiting, standing at the top of the grand staircase, his face etched with anticipation and a hint of trepidation. The moment he saw her step from the carriage, resplendent in her magical gown and glowing with a beauty that surpassed even his fondest memories, his eyes lit up with profound joy and recognition. He rushed down the steps, his face breaking into a wide, adoring smile. "It is you!" he exclaimed, his voice filled with emotion, taking her hands in his. "I knew it was you." He looked into her eyes, seeing not just the beauty of the unknown princess from the ball, but the same gentle spirit, the same kind heart that had captivated him. He noticed the familiar depth in her gaze, the serene calmness he had been so drawn to. "I searched for you, my dearest, and I vowed I would find you." Cinderella smiled, her heart overflowing. "And you did, Your Highness," she explained, softly and briefly. The circumstances of her life, the cruelty of her stepfamily, and the magic of her fairy godmother, all without a trace of bitterness, only gratitude for the turn of events. The prince listened intently, his admiration for her growing even deeper, knowing now the immense strength and resilience hidden beneath her gentle demeanor. He admired her ability to remain kind despite such hardship. The king and queen, equally delighted, embraced Cinderella warmly. They were overjoyed that their son had found not just a beautiful maiden, but a truly kind and virtuous soul. The entire court, who had witnessed her dramatic arrival, now buzzed with excitement and celebration. The mysterious princess had been found, and she was more enchanting than anyone could have imagined. The wedding preparations began almost immediately, filling the palace with a joyful flurry of activity. Cinderella, now known throughout the kingdom not as the ash-covered scullery maid, but as the gentle princess-to-be, was finally treated with the love and respect she had always deserved. She spent her days with the prince, learning about the kingdom, sharing her dreams, and building a foundation for their future together. He was endlessly fascinated by her stories, by the quiet strength of her spirit, and by the way her eyes would light up when she spoke of simple things. On the day of the wedding, the kingdom rejoiced. The sun shone brightly, casting a golden glow over the land. Cinderella, adorned in her magnificent wedding gown, walked down the aisle of the grand cathedral, her hand in the prince's. Her heart swelled with happiness, a feeling so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She thought of her mother, whose words of kindness had guided her through the darkest times, and of her animal friends, whose loyalty and love had sparked the first glimmer of hope. She was no longer just Ella, the kind girl, nor Cinderella, the put-upon maid, but Princess Cinderella, a symbol of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of a good heart. The wedding day was a spectacle of unparalleled joy, a day the kingdom would remember for generations. Cinderella, radiant in her magnificent gown, stood beside her prince, her heart overflowing with a happiness she had once believed impossible. The grand cathedral, filled with the sweet scent of lilies and the soaring melodies of a choir, witnessed their vows. As they exchanged rings, symbols of their eternal love and commitment, a gentle warmth spread through Cinderella's chest, a feeling of belonging she had longed for her entire life. She was no longer just the kind girl who endured hardship, but a beloved princess, destined to rule with grace and compassion. The cheers of the assembled guests, the pealing of church bells, and the brilliant sunshine streaming through stained glass windows painted a vivid picture of a new beginning, a testament to the power of a dream come true. As princess, and later as queen when the old king retired, Cinderella brought a gentle wisdom and profound kindness to her reign. She never forgot her humble beginnings, the feel of ash on her hands, or the sting of cruel words. This memory kept her heart open and empathetic to the struggles of her people, especially the poor and the downtrodden. She ruled not with an iron fist, but with a gentle hand, always seeking justice and fairness. The kingdom flourished under her compassionate guidance, becoming a place where kindness was valued and dreams were encouraged. Her gentle nature perfectly complemented the prince's strength and vision, making them a beloved and revered royal couple. Cinderella ensured that her dear animal friends were always cared for. Jack and Gus, along with their mouse companions, lived a life of pampered ease within the palace walls, often sharing secret snacks and quiet moments with their queen. The stable horse, once the loyal Bruno, was given a verdant meadow to spend his retirement, and the little lizard was often spotted sunning himself on the warm palace stones, a contented glint in his eye. She showed kindness to all creatures, remembering how they had shown her kindness when no one else would. And what of her stepfamily? The stepmother and stepsisters, utterly humiliated and consumed by their own envy and bitterness, were left to face the consequences of their cruel actions. Cinderella, with her generous heart, could have easily banished them or sought retribution. But remembering her mother's words about choosing kindness, she chose not to punish them, but simply to distance herself. They were not invited to live in the palace, nor did they receive any royal favor. They remained in their crumbling house, their lives continuing much as before, but without the vibrant spirit of Ella to torment. Their vanity and greed, however, now festered without an outlet. And they lived out their days in self-imposed misery, forever haunted by the memory of the princess they had so cruelly mistreated. They saw no one, for they had alienated all who might have cared for them, with their ceaseless demands and unkindness. The kingdom, however, quietly celebrated their absence from the public eye, their cruel legacy fading into forgotten whispers. Cinderella and her prince lived a long and happy life, their love deepening with each passing year. They had children who inherited their mother's gentle spirit and their father's strength, ensuring that the legacy of kindness and compassion continued for generations. Cinderella's story became a treasured legend, told and retold across the kingdom, a reminder that true beauty comes from within, that kindness is a powerful magic, and that even in the darkest of times, hope can shimmer and dreams can truly come true. She taught everyone that it is not outward appearances, nor wealth, nor status that truly matters, but the goodness in one's heart, the empathy one shows, and the resilience to choose light even when surrounded by shadows. Her glass slippers, kept safe in a special place, served as a quiet testament to the extraordinary journey of a girl who, despite adversity, found her rightful place in the world, proving that a single act of kindness can indeed change everything. Her reign was marked by peace and prosperity, her compassion echoing through the hearts of her people. She often returned to her old garden, now beautifully restored, remembering the gentle whispers of her mother and the lessons learned among the roses. As the story of Cinderella softly concludes, let the warmth of her journey settle over you like a comforting blanket on a cool night. Her tale is a gentle reminder that even when shadows loom and the path seems uncertain, the flicker of kindness within you is a light that can never be truly extinguished. It tells us that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet courage to keep hoping, to keep dreaming, and to keep believing in the good that lies within yourself and others. Feel the lingering magic of her transformation, the shimmer of her gown, the sparkle of her slippers, and the enduring glow of her gentle heart. As the final images of the moonlit ball and the magnificent palace begin to fade, allow your own thoughts to drift towards peaceful dreams. Let the calm wash over you, knowing that tomorrow is a new day, full of its own quiet wonders and possibilities. Rest now softly and serenely, letting the sweet echoes of this tale carry you deep into a slumber filled with your own beautiful